So Julie, let me just start with you first. Just explain to me kind of the how this group came about and what your goal was in creating it.
Right. So I created the Facebook group from the mountains to the beach. Although I personally have not experienced fire loss, I have been displaced from my home before. And it's just such a jarring, unanchoring experience. You feel like you're sitting on a leg with two chairs. So I lived in LA for 20 years. I lived in Boulder for 10 years. And so I'm connected to all these people on Facebook. And I heard this real outpouring and need to share the experiences that they had had from the Marshall Fire and help people out. And then on the other side, I heard people from LA just completely devastated, unanchored, no idea what to do. And the goal of Facebook group was really to connect survivor to survivor, to offer that kind of advice that you can only have when you've gone through it. So, and what I would say is if you go onto the group, regardless of how unique you think your experience is, if you go there and you post your story and what's happened, someone will have a similar experience. They will have expert advice to offer, and they are really there to help.
And just kind of obviously, there's been a lot of posts, and I've seen the group grow. I think I joined on Friday, so even just in the time that's lapsed since then, what kinds of in monitoring it, in seeing it, what kind of resources have you seen? What kind of connections have been made?
I mean, so many, a lot of times it's not just people who've experienced total loss, but, people who are total loss adjacent don't have any idea what to do. They don't have any idea how to clean their homes. And so they've been able to connect with people for resources to that. Just yesterday, a woman posted, she was a single mom with 3 kids. She lost her house. I actually was able to tag another single mom from the Marshall Fire with 3 kids who had lost her house. And so now they're able to connect and share that experience. And, because that's unique too. There's a whole kinds of other challenges that brings into the situation. So like I said, regardless of what your situation is, someone has lived it and has advice to offer.
Mel, let me bring you in. We just spoke briefly, and just kind of give me in a nutshell what your story was when it came to the Marshall Fire.
I had at the time a horse who I went to visit right at the beginning of the fire because there was another fire about 30 minutes away from the fire that took out all of our houses. So I went to check on him, and when I was driving back, that was when I found out about the Marshall Fire, and that was at noon exactly. And I was driving back, and I got stuck on the highway. We only have one car as a family, and my husband and children were trapped in the house, and the house caught on fire with the family in it. And yeah, there was a pretty traumatic evacuation because the fire department had pulled out at that point, and they wanted the fire to just burn through the neighborhood. None of our fire hydrants were working. And similar story, right? And so there was no help there. My kids called 911 4 times, and finally a policeman stopped outside of our house, but it was just to get his bearings. But because my kids looked out of the door and saw that someone was there, they ran out and jumped in the car with my husband, and 2 dogs without leashes. My kids were in bathrobes. They were barely dressed because they weren't able to get any clothes because the house caught on fire so quickly.
How old were your children at the time?
10 and 11.
It's the age of my kids. I can't even imagine. Um,
Yeah, they had to leave pets behind that were in the house as well because they couldn't get to them, which was quite tragic for them.
Obviously, we're fast forwarding a lot, but what did you end up doing? Did you rebuild? Did you move elsewhere?
Yeah, I ended up rebuilding in a very dramatic way. I rebuilt using compressed earth blocks with 16-inch thick walls and a ventless roof and all of these things. So I tried to build the best house I possibly could so that we could sleep at night, because we get crazy winds here in the middle of the night that are 60, 70, 80, 90 mile an hour winds. And I know that if I had the same kind of house, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And so yeah, we built this very proactive house using natural materials that doesn't burn, because when I came back to my burn site, I noticed piles of dirt that were plant pots that had burned, and it was just the dirt just sitting there. So I somehow found an advertisement of compressed earth blocks and contacted the company, and they supported me through the process, and we built an earth block home.
You know, I think for those victims of the Palisades fire, the Eaton fire, they're left with just an entire, you know, neighborhoods, just house after, I mean, you've seen the images, you know, it's just mass destruction. I
Our
think a lot-
neighborhood burned down in 2 hours. 171 homes burned down in 2 hours in our neighborhood. Everything gone, completely gone.
when you see the devastation here, does it feel very familiar?
Oh, yes. And the thing that feels so familiar is the reaction from the people. I was looking at a social media post of a friend of mine that has lost their home in California, and the look on their faces was the same look that we had on our faces. It's like a deer in headlights on pause. Just this like look on the face, because you're just in complete shock, and you're in shock for weeks. It takes about 6 weeks, I think, for everything to really kind of settle down, but you're in survival mode, and I see that on the people, and it breaks my heart.
What would you say to them if you could?
Hold on, there's a lot of help, especially if you really look for it as well. Your community is going to help you, they're going to support you. I'm already seeing it on network TV and things like that. I'm already seeing like people banding together and helping from all different places. And just to lean on each other and give yourself time as well. Give yourself time to grieve and get through the process, because it's a really long process. I just moved into my house in July, 2.5 years later. So
You know, people are going to have to make that tough decision, stay or go, build or relocate.
Yeah.
What would you tell people who are asking themselves that question right now?
Well, I had the benefit of living in Florida before I moved to Colorado, and I went through 3 major hurricanes. I've been through 2 Cat 4s and 1 Cat 3 and a handful of other hurricanes. And I've seen complete neighborhoods be destroyed and build back better and safer. And I saw that happen over almost 20 years of living in Florida. So like there is hope. And there are methods of building back better. And California actually has some of the leading products and the leading standards for rebuilding for fireproof stuff, because I used a lot of Californian products in my house.
Did you guys ever, you know, you piqued my interest because I didn't realize that about the Marshall Fire, and there's so much misinformation and so much back and forth about our water and our fire hydrants. Did you guys ever figure out why there was no water in your hydrants?
The backup supply of electricity wasn't fireproof, and also the sprinkler system in Target, which is right next to us, took all the water pressure.
Okay. Let me ask you this. What is the biggest mistake that you made, and what is the best thing you've done in those 2.5 years?
I think mistake-wise, I would be very careful with some of the contractors that you work with to make sure that they are people that are not going to try to scam you. So I think, and then also, I don't know if it was just us, but I think everyone, we filled out so many forms for support. A lot of us got our we had identities kind of stolen, had a lot of spam. And a lot of, like my phone was ringing constantly from India and all places all over the world trying to sell me this, sell me that, and scam me with this, that, and the other. So I think that was, you need to try to protect your identity. And that I think maybe the only mistake that was made. And what was the other question?
What's your best piece of advice? What's the one thing that if you could have, you know, just give one nugget to Angelenos who have lost their homes, what would you say to them?
I'm going to say something a little different here, but be careful with what you read on social media. Conspiracy theories, I think, can be very, very hurtful. People saying that people in certain neighborhoods don't deserve to have their houses rebuilt because they're rich, things like that. Try not to listen to that. And then also, one of the things that affected me the most was the disaster tourism. That was really painful for me. People driving backwards and forwards with their phones out. So try to protect yourself from the naysayers and the conspiracy theory people and just the nasty people, because you have a right to be helped and you have a right to ask for support.
Okay. And I think, is it Makia?
Oh, no, it's Makia.
Makia, because I think
Yes.
you need to leave.
Oh no, I'm all
Or
right.
who was it? Was there someone who had to be off by 11? That was you,
No.
Mel. Okay, so
The other
so if
M.
that happens, I'm okay. Well, since I have you, so it's Makia, and your
Yeah.
last name is pronounced how?
Minnick.
Minich.
Yep.
And did you lose your home?
Yes, I'm actually in the same neighborhood as Mel. She lives on the south side of our little neighborhood, and I'm up on the north side, and both of us are on the back onto the open space. So both of us basically, both of our houses were just in the line of the fire, and the winds and everything else that day. So yeah, I know Mel's story quite well because we lived kind of a lot of the same story throughout a lot of this.
So your home, a total loss.
Yes.
What did you end up doing? Did you rebuild? Did you stay?
So we rebuilt. Basically, we went with a production builder. One of the nice things about, or one of the outcomes of kind of what happened, especially in our smaller neighborhood, is the neighborhood all grouped together very quickly. Created a Slack channel, got everybody, as many people in the neighborhood as they could. A lot of strangers, and everybody just kind of all jumped together, figured out, we're all living together, kind of dealing with this together. We had people putting together, proposals and everything to local builders to actually start trying to figure out what that process will look like so that everybody could join in. And it just happened to be people in the neighborhood that kind of, they figured out what their strengths were, what was missing. Everybody kind of pieced in what we needed. And so we actually had a number of production builders that very quickly came to the table with different plans for our neighborhood, different options. Some people went with more custom builds and everything else. We went with one of the local production builders, and we were one of the first houses rebuilt back in the neighborhood. Just kind of turned it around as fast as I could. So yeah.
How quickly did you turn it around?
So we were back in, let's see, probably a year and a half, was about the time we were back in after everything.
Did some of those around you, did some of your neighbors choose to leave and not rebuild?
So actually on both sides of my house, and there might be some sounds of construction periodically, both of my neighbors have decided to try to figure something else out. So both of those lots are for sale. And one of them was a house of like they were renting the house out. And so I think they're trying to sell to somebody else to figure out something. But the other neighbors, we've gotten very close, and they as a result of all of this, and not wanting to deal with kind of the traumas of the winds and everything to come from there, they decided they took their family and went to Tennessee instead. So, different families are making a lot of different choices in this.
I think that a lot of what I'm hearing is people saying, how can this ever feel like a neighborhood again? There's so much destruction.
So, that was one of the weird things in our neighborhood is it weirdly, so before the fire, we're a very small neighborhood out here. A lot of our houses are literally 10 feet apart. So, but we weren't really some people were a lot more closer. I tend to be very introverted. So our family was, didn't really necessarily know everybody on the neighborhood. But as a result of all this, and again, right after the fire, everybody getting together, we became a lot closer as a community in general before even rebuilding and before even moving home. As I don't know the percentage, I think we're at 80+%, probably 90+% rebuilt in our neighborhood, and a lot of those families are back home. And you see a lot more people like actually, stopping, talking, playing on the various playgrounds. We actually have playgrounds again. So you're seeing those families actually be a lot closer than they were before. It seems in my opinion.
What about insurance? How did that go?
It was a nightmare for basically everyone. It, as many different traumas as you can have in losing everything, it's just one more trauma on top of it. We, it's basically you have to become smarter than every system you're up against. So trying to figure out, I saw a question on one of the Facebook group of, how do I get how do I get a copy of my insurance policy because the insurance isn't giving it to me. Well, insurance are required to. You need to get a certified copy. You need to contact them and get a certified copy. There's a lot of those pieces that when you hit the ground after all of this, you just don't know what's going on. So you get lost very quickly. I think we went through, what was it? Ultimately, 7 different insurance adjusters over all of this. And every time that happened, it was a reset and they had to look at the paperwork and where was the last person doing and what do we do now? And so every moment was just trying to figure out where you are in this world and kind of starting over. So it's something that it's surprisingly difficult because most of the time you just don't even pay attention to it. But when you're in the middle of it, it's hard.
So best piece of advice when it comes to navigating insurance?
Um, be take a lot of notes and be hard on them. Basically, recognize that what they're going to do is they're going to throw a bunch of adjusters at you, and some of them are going to be a lot nicer than others. Some of them are going to be a lot more competent than others. They are probably going to switch out the more competent ones to send them somewhere else so that somebody else can kind of do their best to get you less money. Take as many notes, figure out where you're at, know what's in your policy. Keep tabs on that, and also recognize that insurance is a business and it's okay to be somewhat mean to that adjuster because you need to get what you need from them. I'm a non-confrontational person, so I had to learn that very, very quickly.
Does anybody else want to, and I'll get to everybody individually, but does anybody else, since we're on the topic of insurance, does anybody want to chime in on private adjuster, like hiring someone versus using the insurance, or, because that's good. That's right after the initial crisis, especially for us here in California, where we were already in an insurance crisis. Any advice? Yeah, Mel, go ahead.
As a family, we highly recommend not going with a private adjuster because they take, you're going to not get enough insurance to rebuild as it is. And then the profit that they take from their assessment of everything is going to take that extra bit of money that you really need. And yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of mixed especially in our area, there's kind of a few different areas that were affected, and there's a lot of mixed kind of dealings with either with your adjuster or getting a private adjuster. Some people went with private, some stuck with just going to the insurance. We also didn't get a private adjuster because, again, to what she just said, I mean, you're right that they're going to take their cut. And also add on top of that, trying to find legitimate adjusters versus anybody else, which was definitely a huge problem for a lot of people. I saw in our neighborhood, some people, all of a sudden their private adjuster just wouldn't talk to them anymore, and just kind of disappeared. So you see a lot of that. The other part of it is, in some ways, I know I just mentioned you need to be hard on the insurance, but part of it is you also need them as much on your side as possible because they're going to be the ones that controlling that check. So as soon as you get somebody else involved, that person is now the person or that group is now who the insurance is going to talk to. And so now you have to rely on them for a lot of things. So you lose a lot of control. You lose a fair amount of the insurance proceeds that should have been coming to you. But it's also very overwhelming. So I can't knock the people that also did go with private adjusters, especially because there's a difference between the personal property and the actual building or the building proceeds. Those are two very different things. The personal property is a horrible, traumatic thing that I think is only done by the insurance adjusters so that they can make your life as miserable as possible. But yeah, that's my opinion.
I did go through personal property loss once, so I know what you mean, and it was on a much smaller scale. Meryl, I'm going to bring you up. What is your last name, Meryl?
It's Suissa, Suissa.
Oh, okay. Yes. Julie told me all about you. And just, kind of, I know it's a long story, but as brief as you can make it, without being too brief. You obviously lost your home.
I did not lose my home. So I
Oh.
started the Marshall Fire Community Facebook group. So I live in Colorado. I lived in Lakewood at the time of the fires, and I'm a CU Boulder alum. So when this fire broke out in Boulder, Colorado, the winds were horrendous where I was. And once I heard there was fire, I just knew this was going to be awful. And I'm a physician assistant by trade, and I just was born with this desire to help others. So when I saw what was going on, I just decided I have to do something. And the only thing I could think of was, I know I'm going to get on Facebook and allow people like the Buy Nothing groups that we see to exchange goods for free. Whatever people need, there's got to be someone who has it, right? And that was my whole goal at first, was just let people exchange goods. And it became so much more. So we ended up realizing that families right now, if you're realizing, hey, I'm posting on Facebook, I'm making offers, but no one's here, it's because families right now, in the days after the fire, are just trying to figure out how to survive. Where am I going to live? How am I going to feed my kids? Where do we find clothing? What school do my kids go to? Right? They're trying to deal with basics of just having lost everything. So they weren't on Facebook for a little bit. And then we realized the other problem was, much like California, they had lost their vehicles. So getting to a center that had all these massive amounts of donations was nearly impossible. So we decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to get lists. I had people call me on my cell phone, and I was usually up until 3 a.m. and then slept 4 hours and then started again. And I would have people call me on my cell phone and tell me a list of what they lost. Any big ticket items, I had someone that reached out named Lisa, and she contacted the big companies to try and get those big ticket items donated back. And then I would take the little items of immediate needs, underwear, socks, this size clothing, this stuffed animal that my daughter can't live without, and get people in the group who said, I have that. And I would get them to mobilize and drive to Boulder and drop it on people's doorsteps where they were in their temporary housing. So that's how it started. And then as their needs changed, we did too. And we created something called the Giving Email Movement, where we shared wish lists. We had people make an Amazon wish list. We put them all in one place. And then we shared those wish lists with the world. We had people donating from the Philippines to these wish lists because it was something they could do. And then we did everything. I mean, we got into throwing birthday parties for kids who had nothing. We got into, oh my gosh, what did we do? So many things. We got into, renting out, having like the Butterfly Pavilion donate a birthday party. We got into replacing Judaica because it was almost Passover for people who had lost, Christmas decorations, Easter. I mean, think of everything you have in your house. People didn't have any of that. And the holidays are a stark reminder of what we don't have sometimes. And so we made sure, then we did events where we contacted places like Walmart and got them to help us with the lowest price possible with toolkits. Think of how expensive tools are. And then we'd collect these, and we would have distribution events where we would physically hand out these toolkits. So, and more than anything, I think the group provided a place, like Julie's group does, for people to come, right? It was a place they always knew they could turn. It was a place for support. It was a place where they could talk about their woes, their frustrations, and other people could respond and say, I feel that so deeply.
And
Our
so,
Facebook group,
sorry,
yeah.
how many people?
No, go ahead. We grew to 6,000 people. At one point, we had 7,000. We've lost a few over the past year because we're 3 years out, but we grew to 7,000 people, and there were people helping all over the US, calling me and asking what they could do and how they could help.
And so for you, I guess, you know, there are so many Angelinos who want to help. What would your advice be for how you can best support these fire victims?
I think the good news is there's a lot of ways to help. If you have a friend or a family member who has lost in this fire, call them and say, I want to help, but don't say, what can I do? Look at your own skill set, because asking for what can I do is like the mental load right now for these people is 10 times normal, right? They don't even know how to tell you what to do because everything has to be done. So what's your skill set? Are you good at filling out forms? Are you good at making Amazon wish lists? Are you good at social media? Can you share their story? Can you share their GoFundMe? Are you good at starting a meal train? Do you want to send them a meal kit? Do you want to bring them meals? Find some way that you can help someone. If you don't know someone who lost, then still amplify this message. GoFundMe has a lot of fundraisers right now that are going around where they will take the funds that are raised and they will create grants that are given to people within 1 to 2 days that are immediate cash grants put into their GoFundMes to help with immediate needs. So donate if you can, but donate to the proper platforms, right? Donate to the verified GoFundMes. They usually are all in one page there. Go volunteer for a few hours. You know, the biggest thing is be kind, right? Be kind and don't feed into, like Melanie was saying, all the stuff on social media about conspiracy theories and, well, these people don't deserve it. I can't tell you how many times people would comment on the wish list that I would post and say, they really want like a KitchenAid mixer. Why? Well, because it's what they had pre-fire. And the thing that people don't understand is getting stuff after a fire is great and the immediate need and the underwear, but having your things makes these temporary homes a little bit more like your old life. And that things for people are not about material possessions after a fire. It's not about how much materialism can I have and how much can I reaccumulate. It's about the memories. This is where I get emotional. So, it's about the memories. It's about the fact that people were making cookies with their kids right before the holidays. And that KitchenAid mixer has so many memories, right? So that's what these things are about. It's about the first time your kid took that step right there, you know, and you don't have that. So trying to recreate those memories by having things that you don't have anymore. You don't have that house, but maybe now you have another KitchenAid mixer and you can remake those memories, right? So that's what's so important about this, is realizing everyone deserves to have what they had pre-fire, even if they had a lot, because they worked hard for that or someone gifted that to them. There's an attachment to our things because it makes us who we are. It makes us who we are, and it helps us go through our life, right? So I think that's the most important thing. If you're not part of this disaster, if you're far away, is remember, these are human beings who, just like you at Christmas, made Christmas cookies with their kids. And the last thing they saw was their Christmas tree up. And that was the end of it. You know, they've never seen that stuff again. So I think that's a big way to help. I think the other way to help and to just understand in general for families who are going through this, much like others have touched on, is make sure you build community, right? Whether it's online community like Julie's group and the Marshall Fire Community Facebook page did. If you don't lose touch with your neighborhood, right? These are people who saw each other sometimes every day. Their kids played together every day, and now they're scattered throughout all of California. And that can be just a break in your community is really tough to begin with. So create groups together, create Slack groups, create WhatsApp groups, stay in touch, physically get together, do Zoom get-togethers, have your kids play together. You know, keeping your old community will take you far through this because they're the ones that understand exactly what you're going through.
That was great. You got me emotional too. Kids.
I'm sorry I cried. I had really tried to hold it together.
That's
I
okay.
think my kind of biggest stepwise advice too for people going through this is If you haven't already started a GoFundMe, do. Just like you guys have talked about with personal property loss, you usually get pennies on the dollar. So there will be a gap even if you're fully covered. Find people who can help. Find people with a skill set. Find people who can help you find a place to live. And the biggest thing is if you have a policy, an insurance policy, and you have ALE, just like they were saying, push your insurance. Most people have 12 months of ALE, but after a disaster like this, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We're unfortunately looking at about probably a decade before everything is as it was. Some people will get into houses in a year and a half, 2 years, 3, but only 60% of Marshall Fire families are back in their homes after 3 years here. And we don't have a lot of the housing crisis in LA, that it's expensive to build in LA, the crews to build, right? So understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. To the people who want to help, don't just be there now. Be there long term. I kept telling people, yeah, I'll keep this group open for 6 months. And there were still needs at 6 months. So I kept saying, I'll keep this group open for a year. And at a year, we weren't done yet. And we still aren't done. It's 3 years later, and every day people are still exchanging goods in that group for free. They're still asking questions. They're still providing support. So just know that it's going to take time. And if you're someone that really, truly wants to help, check back in. See how you can help 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now. All of that will be really important to this community, because the biggest thing that the Marshall Fire families told me was, thank you for helping people not forget about us. We don't want to be forgotten. And when the next natural disaster happens, unfortunately, people forget very quickly, right? Everything is sensationalized about the next disaster. This is happening with North Carolina. They're still in ruins. Most people don't even have, some temporary long-term housing, and we're on to the next disaster, right? And so that's the biggest thing is get on this, figure out how you can help, and stick with it for years to come. So that's my biggest advice to everyone out there.
That was great. That was great, Meryl. And Courtney, Walsh is your last name? Okay. And oh, you're muted. Did you lose your home?
So I lost my home in the 2020 fires, right? It was 1 year before the Marshall fires. I lost my home during COVID. So we were, at home schooling. I was working all at home. All of it was about being in the home. We were, nobody could leave. You're not supposed to go over to other people's homes. So when our home completely was a loss, it burned to the ground. We evacuated with few things. I evacuated with a laundry basket. I grabbed a few pieces of art off the wall. We luckily were able to evacuate with our pets. We had 2 dogs and 2 bunnies, and grabbing the bunnies was not really my priority over my things, but we have the bunnies. So, anyways, yeah, so I lost my home in 2020. So for me, it's been 4.5 years.
And did you rebuild?
So we did not rebuild. My home obviously was not in the Marshall Fire area, was not in it was in a mountain community. That community has since had 3 other, maybe 4 other evacuations. And through the time, so I just was decided that it was too painful to live there and to try and have another home be built in that same area where we lost everything. So we decided that it was time for us just to move into the city. And I live semi-close, like next to a firehouse now.
What is the best piece of advice you have for those who are, who have just lost their homes?
Sure. So, I think a couple of things. I mean, all of these things that everyone's been bringing up, it just is like, it reminds me, it takes me back to those times. I was one of very few people at the time who had lost my house to a fire. So this was before the Marshall Fire, which again, my heart just goes out to everyone in Los Angeles because I know what the loss is like. But my biggest advice is a couple things. There's no such thing as rebuild. You don't rebuild something that is completely lost. The rebuild is not a word that should even exist. Building is what we need to be doing. Building new, building what you want your life to look like. Maybe it's finding some of those things that you loved and buying them again, a new item. Maybe it's the same brand, maybe it's the same, maybe you go back to an artist and you work with the artist for a new piece of art that was built, but there's no such thing as getting back the things that were lost. Like those are gone. And pretending like you can just rebuild everything and redo everything. There's no such thing as that. There's only rebuilding. There's only building. And I say that because it's painful when people say when you lost your home and days later, months later, weeks later, people say, are you going to rebuild? You know, if a woman has a miscarriage, people say, are you going to try again? It's so insensitive. It's just like the most insensitive thing to ask. Are you going to rebuild? Because that's them trying to get to the end of your trauma, right? That doesn't work that way. Rebuilding is complicated. It's being in the same place where you lost everything. It's insurance complications. It's, do I even want what I had before? It's a reckoning with yourself on deciding what is my life now. And I think, I am extremely thankful for the fire. And I think that's the message that I would like to say is that it opened my eyes to the opportunity to build what I want to build and to let go of the things that never served me anyways, but that I found in my life, and to build now going forward in an extremely mindful way of exactly what I want and why I want it. I didn't ask those questions before. Sometimes I would go to the store and maybe I would buy two or three of the same item thinking, oh, it'd be nice to have duplicates of this item like gloves or whatever. And I don't do that anymore. I'm way more mindful. I'm less materialistic now. I really think about things before I get them. I think, would I even want this after the fire? It's kind of a trauma, but I still live with that. I feel lighter now after my fire. I am extremely lucky. I live in a really beautiful home now in downtown Boulder, but it is only built with the things that exactly serve me. My children don't hang on to things that don't exactly serve them. If something doesn't fit me anymore, it doesn't stay in my closet just hanging out. So anyways, I am much lighter 4.5 years later after my fire. I feel like I'm much more mindful around the things that I accumulate. And I am thankful for community, for handmade things, for bespoke things, for moments, and for people, more so than any belongings or anything. Life is so impermanent, and so are all of our things, right? Everything we see in front of us is going to be gone in 100 years or less. So just being mindful of the things that we are accumulating in our lives. The fire is just a stark example of it, just telling you a clear story that it is time now for you to build a life of meaning.
In that building, obviously, you need money and insurance. Is there any advice that you have for people, especially those who choose, like you, to move to a different place?
Sorry, ask that one more time. But what?
Just insurance advice, because unlike the other people I talked to who kept their lot, built on that lot, what advice do you have should people say, you know, hey, I'm going to move somewhere else?
Sure. So the insurance thing, you know, Makia, is that how you pronounce it? Makia. It rang so true. The insurance company, they put you through the ringer because their job is not to make you whole. Their job is to watch their bottom line. And when you think I am not confrontational, I don't want to fight. I want to do everything above board. In fact, I didn't even want to deal with the insurance of the things that I deserved. But the stark truth is that insurance companies are not your friend. They're not here to help you. They are here to watch their bottom line. They make you go through the rigmarole of new adjuster, new adjuster, new adjuster, so that they can beat you down and not help you. They're not here to help. I don't care what insurance company you have or that's what, you know, people would say, oh, well, my insurance company would do this. No, you have not lost a multi-million-dollar asset. So the comparison of insurance companies is just the main bottom line is that insurance companies are not here to help you. They're here to watch their bottom line. I highly recommend, if you're able, to have counsel to support you, then do that. If you have friends who are offering that have the skill set in negotiating on your behalf, I would highly recommend that. Seeking help to speak with insurance companies, to be a mediator. If there's services or there's community and someone's willing to offer that help, I highly recommend getting as much help and advice, and people who have gone through it, as much advice as you can when dealing with the insurance, because it is on top of your trauma, it is another trauma. I feel very lucky. I'm well resourced. I had a community of people helping me. We decided to relocate. At the time during COVID, building costs, people being able to even build was not even in question. I mean, we couldn't even do it because there was no building at that time during COVID. So it really wasn't even an option for us. But my biggest advice is, in this new sense of building what you want, decide if you want to build where the home previously was, or if you want to build somewhere else. And when I mean build, that could be buying something else, if you can, using the money from the insurance to buy in another location, and deciding what your options are and really getting the resources. I don't know if that's helpful, but it
No,
wasn't
that's helpful.
it wasn't an option for me to rebuild because it was too painful.
And just kind of a last like targeted question to you, biggest mistake you made that you don't want other people to make?
The biggest mistake was accepting the initial money that the insurance tried to give us. We accepted the measly 5,000 here, 5,000 there. And then the insurance company tried to make the case that they were helping us, when really they were trying to just drip feed us excuses and a little bit of money at a time so that they didn't actually have to pay out our insurance claim. So that was our biggest mistake, was accepting the initial offering from the insurance company that they gave us, because we didn't have any money or belongings or things at the time. And so, of course, we just went along with whatever they said. And then we realized we were in over our skis because we didn't realize that they would be switching us insurance adjusters every 2 weeks. Several insurance adjusters who tried to help us got fired because they were actually trying to help us. So then they would get fired. And then they would put us over to the legal department. The moment they put us over to the legal department, we really sought out help from our community to ask what we should do. And our community came through for us and offered legal assistance to help us with the insurance company.
So if you could do it over, would you not have taken that initial money?
If I could do it over, I would not have accepted the initial offering and money from the insurance company. I would have looked at my insurance policy and said, you owe us this money, not in small amounts. You owe us that money in a big amount. Them drip feeding you money is their way of playing their game.
Okay.
And it's a very, very unfair game.
Yeah. And I want to I don't want to keep you guys for much longer, but just going down the line, Julie, what do you want Angelenos to hear from you?
Well, I think what I've heard from everybody on this call and what I'd like them to hear from me is community, community, community. So that seems to have been what came through for everyone, whether it's someone like Meryl who came in from the outside to relieve people's trauma, because it's really hard to think during these crises, like, what should I do now? What should I do now? Or whether it's like within the Marshall community, you know, getting to know neighbors or reconnecting with neighbors. And now what I'm proposing is, you know, from the mountains to the beach, we'd like to be your community. In Colorado, we'd like to offer that to Angelenos. Let us be your community. Let us help you through this.
And what about you, Meryl?
I think my biggest
Oh, I think she froze. Is that frozen for everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on, Meryl, I'm going to come back to you because you're frozen. So, Makia, what is your advice?
biggest
I mean,
message, like I said, was community as well. But I think in all of this, say, I'm okay, I can figure it out. Did you guys freeze?
Yeah, hold on, Meryl, you froze. I'm going to come back to you. Makia, what would you want to tell Angelenos?
so I think to that point, you know, it is important to seek out the community, to recognize that right after everything that happened, you are kind of stuck in this roller coaster that you don't know what to do about, and it kind of feels like you're alone in it. There is that community that's going on. There are the people that are around you that are going through exactly what you're going through, but there's also a lot of these other communities that are kind of being pulled together, that of people like us that already went through a number of those pieces. So, kind of take that, ask for help. I'm not a good person to ask for help. I had to learn that very, very quickly, that, talk to the people around you, talk to your family, try to, be willing to ask for that help, because this gets very overwhelming very quickly. Yeah.
Did anybody, the one thing people are struggling with now is finding rental property, which I know California is obviously very unique in our density and lack of options. I've only just visited Colorado. I don't know what your guys' housing is like, but I'm hearing like people will show up to look at a place and there's like 15 other fire victims lined up behind them. I don't know if you guys face that at all. And if you did, do you have any advice for those who are struggling to just find a place to live right now, especially if they want to stay, in the immediate area because like their kids go to school and their school's still standing, that kind of thing?
So I know right after our fire, there was a little bit of that lull in between while everybody was trying to figure out like what even ALE meant. It became a kind of a rush to find housing. I know that initially it became very difficult very quickly, because all of a sudden you had thousands of families in a few small communities trying to find housing right next to like right near where they were used to. It's difficult. You're going to have to probably, in some ways. So I think I saw that recently there's been some lists that have been pulled together, especially in the LA area, of price gouging on land, or on landlord price gouging, and a number of those kinds of things. Keep an eye out for that. It's going to be hard because you guys have so many people in such a small, it's a big area, but so many small areas trying to all find the same housing. It's gonna be hard, but you may have to look a little further. It's gonna be traumatic to be willing to do that, but you might need to, and recognize that there are virtual ways to still kind of keep your community together. But housing is going to be important, and you may have to look around, but just be careful for people trying to take advantage of everything.
And just lastly, we talk about housing and insurance and all that stuff, mental health, obviously. I mean, I'm assuming you guys are still struggling with the PTSD from this.
So I know our mental health has been kind of all over the place. So I'm more of a, so because there's so many different people and different types that have been affected by this, I'm very much a fixer kind of a person. So my whole entire mental health was, this happened. What's next step? What do I need to know now? What do I have to worry about? How does insurance work? How does taxes work? How does housing work? And so as soon as I could start answering questions, was where my everything kind of aligns. But there are a number of people that, you know, it's a lot harder. You just lost everything. So you need to take that moment and recognize that that happened to you. Take a breath. You know, try to focus on your family, focus on the things that are important in that moment, like what's really important in that moment. You're going to want to chase all of the things that you had. You're going to want to chase, you know, being mad at everything that happened, and just try to, you know, take a moment and recognize that you're safe. You have a next step. You have people that are actually out there to help. Look for them, but it's going to be a long problem. Seek out, you know, I know out here in Colorado, I don't know what's going on in the LA area, but I know a number of different health services opened up. I know that Merrill kind of aligned a lot of them as well, where, you know, different small groups and different sized groups offering different mental health services to people. So seek those out if you need them. Be willing to access those if you need to.
Does anybody want to add anything that I haven't touched on?
I'm sorry, I lost reception there for a second. What I was saying was look for the helpers. I think that it's really important to know that in accepting help, you're also healing others. I'm much like he is in that fixing and helping is how I heal. And so this is a collective trauma that so many are going through. And so allowing people to helping is really truly what makes us human. And helping others is what generates that human connection. So really allow others to help you, give them a thing they can do. People want to help, and that is how they feel good about helping you process not only your trauma, but their trauma as well. And to echo mental health, even if you didn't go through loss, but you are intimately involved in the recovery of this, make sure you take care of your mental health. You can see with how emotional I got that this affects you, even if you're just helping people. People asked me when the California fires started if I could do another group again, and I couldn't do it because I still hold the pain of all 900 families that I helped. And so even if you're close to this, if you're going through this, don't neglect your mental health. The other thing for people to realize is trauma lasts years. When the winds blow here, every family's affected. When the Santa Anas come every year in LA, it will re-trigger you. And so ignore the naysayers and the haters who say, why are you reacting now? It's been 5 years. It will always bring this up. It will put you right back there. That's how our brains keep us safe. It remembers a scary situation and it tells us we're not okay. And so mental health, there is a list of resources. How I helped this time the most, besides being a connector again and doing a few side projects again, I'm going to help some firefighters, and we're replacing Judaica again, things like that. We're doing a firefighter matching program, things like that, is I made a resource guide, and I will send it to you guys so you can put it on your website. But there are resources for mental health in there. There is an entire list of pro bono mental health, and please take the time to look for your mental health and that of your family, and check in with each other, right? Form a team now with your family members, whoever lived with you, whoever lost with you, and check in on each other often, because we all need someone to tell us it's okay to not be okay, and to help us get to the point of being okay. We may never be whole again after a trauma. There will be maybe a piece of us that's always missing, but we can find wholeness through others and through community.
The one thing I was just going to say about this particular conversation and what Julie's doing, what Merrill's doing, and is my biggest advice in seeking out the help, because I felt very alone because there was only a couple people who had gone through this. My neighbors all scattered. The Marshall Fire happened a year after. So my biggest advice to the fire victims is talk to people who have been through it. Seek out the people in Los Angeles. Please speak to the people in Colorado who have been through it. Take the time, make the time to speak to other fire victims who have been through it and went through it years ago, who have now come out the other side. They will be able to help you the very most because they've been through it, they understand, and they can provide advice and as well as resources. The biggest help I had was speaking to people who had lost their homes even a decade ago before mine, because they had the best perspective possible. That was really, really helpful for me.
Thank you so much to all of you guys. And Mel's husband, I know there's listening. I think I'm good. He said that he'd hop on if I needed it, but I think I have more than enough. But I just want to say thank you. You guys have been a wealth of information. If you think of anything that you forgot, you can always tell Julie. She can send it to me. I can always put it in there. And I just think that what you're doing is such a great service for the people here in Los Angeles, because you know, you're right. Like even any big change in our life, like I remember when I became a mom, it was like my mom group was so important to me because we could relate. And then when I had twins, it was like I had to find twin moms because I had to be able to relate to that. And, you know, just those shared experiences can get you through, you know, the hardest times in your life. So I appreciate that.